This video is going to be about the kingdom Animalia, or animals, which we should be very familiar with. So first of all animals are heterotrophic, meaning they don't make their own food and instead have to eat. All animals are multicellular. Most can move either during their whole life or part of their lives. Animals are more complex than protists that resemble animals, and animal cells do not have cell walls. So the way an animal body looks can depend on its symmetry, and there are three different types of symmetry in the animal world. So first of all, it's bilateral symmetry. An animal that has bilateral symmetry can be cut down the center of its body in just one direction, and the left side will mirror the right side. Now, they might not be exactly identical. For instance, if we are cut down the middle, our heart is on our left side. We don't have another heart on our right side. Maybe you have a dimple on your right cheek and not your left cheek. So they might not be identical, but overall the general structure is the same on both sides. In radial symmetry, the animal can be cut down the center in any direction, and one side will mirror the other side. An example of a type of radial symmetry we see in animals is pentaradial symmetry. So think of a pentagon. A pentagon has 5 sides. In pentaradial symmetry, the animal can just be cut down in 5 different directions going through the center of the animal. Now, there's one type of animal that is actually asymmetric. That means it doesn't have any symmetry. There's no way we can cut it and always have one side mirror the other. Another way to distinguish animals is just how they move and what type of support system they have. So animals can be either invertebrates or vertebrates. Invertebrate animals don't have a backbone. Vertebrate animals do. Now, invertebrate animals, to help them with support, often have an exoskeleton, and that just means a skeleton on the outside. So if you imagine this person with a coat of armor on, that coat of armor is sort of like acting like an exoskeleton. But then, of course, humans actually have what's called an endoskeleton, meaning we have a skeleton on the inside. And a better example of an animal with an exoskeleton is something like an ant. So it has that hard shell on the outside its entire body. Humans, of course, have that endoskeleton, which is normally covered by muscles and skin. So some other types of skeletons, or really just one other type of skeleton, is a hydroskeleton. In a hydroskeleton, we'll find this in organisms that live in the water, and they actually have fluid inside their bodies that allow the animal to hold its shape. So if you imagine a water balloon, once you fill that balloon with water, it holds its shape really well. Something like a jellyfish is going to use liquid to maintain its shape. If you take a jellyfish out of the water, it just looks like a big blob of gel. Exoskeletons we've talked about. So animals with exoskeletons have that hard body, or hard skeleton. The skeleton's actually made up of a substance called chitin, and to allow those animals to move, their skeleton is jointed. Now, for an animal with an exoskeleton to grow, they actually have to molt, or to shed their skeleton, because it doesn't grow with them. So they shed their skeleton, and then they have to grow a new one. So while their new shell is really soft, they're actually very vulnerable to predators. Once it's hard, then they have a great shield against anything getting to the inside of their bodies and damaging the insides. Endoskeletons. Vertebrates, like us, have an endoskeleton. Echinoderms, so things like sea urchins and sea stars, actually have an endoskeleton as well. They provide support, protection, and allow us to move very easily. And you might think, well, it's protection. Maybe we're not as protected as we would be if we had an exoskeleton, but think of our rib cage. Our rib cage is definitely providing protection to a lot of our vital organs on the inside, like our lungs and our heart. A skeleton can be made out of bone like ours, but something like a shark, a skate, or a ray, their endoskeletons are made up of cartilage. Some animals are also segmented. An animal with segmentation has repeating parts or segments. Now, segmented animals always display bilateral symmetry, and those segmentations can be internal or external. So looking below that worm on the right or caterpillar, the segmentation would be really obvious. On the left, in the lobster, we see some of that segmentation on the outside of the animal, but it definitely has more segmentation on the inside. So worms, insects, and vertebrates are considered segmented. So our segmentation is much less obvious. It's more on the inside of our bodies than what we see on the outside. Animals do move throughout their lives, and we have limbs to help us do that. So appendages or limbs, these could be things like legs and arms or flippers and wings, but also bristles like that worm on the right. All those little tufts sticking out from the side of its body help that worm move. Finally, animals do tend to have pretty good ways of interacting with their environment, sensing their environment, and being able to react to that. So some animals, like humans, have what's called cephalization. This is a concentration of sense organs and nerve cells at the anterior end, which is the front or top end of the animal. And in many, many animals, that means it has a head. In some animals, it even means it has a brain. Other animals may not have cephalization, but they still have sensory organs that are arranged into a nerve net. And this is literally a net that surrounds the body. So there's no centralized area with a higher concentration of nerves. It's just throughout the entire body, which you can see here on this hydra. So there's a very, very large diversity of animals, especially invertebrate animals. Most animals on Earth are invertebrates. So all the insects in the world, and then a lot of organisms living in the oceans are invertebrates, and then there are just, a small percentage of animals are actually vertebrates. We tend to think of vertebrate animals more often, but remember that most animals are invertebrates.